I'll use my story of resilience and owning my story. So I will talk about my failures first and foremost, because that resonates with an entire audience, because
Yeah.
we have all
You can
failed
go
at
on all
something,
day,
right?
but just about failure.
Yeah.
Hey there, besties. Welcome to our cozy corner of the podcasting world. Thank you for pressing play and spending some time with me here on Share a Latte. I'm Min Sukree, your virtual coffee bestie, podcast orchestrator, master storyteller, and your caffeinated host. Picture us in a cozy cafe with the rich scent of freshly brewed coffee as we embark on a journey filled with inspiration. In each episode, remarkable women share their tales of overcoming life's hurdles, offering a comforting embrace for your spirit. These narratives serve as a reminder that resilience and unwavering determination pave the way to success. Join me each week for conversations that will stir your mind, warm your heart, and you'll unearthly own your own ability to transform challenges into remarkable strengths. The Share a Latte podcast brings us hope, courage, and the belief that you can not only handle life, but thrive throughout your day. All right, besties, let's embrace those tales of triumphs and get ready for another episode of Share a Latte. Welcome back, latte and podcast lovers. Thanks for pressing play and joining me here on Share a Latte, the podcast where we sip coffee and indulge in inspiring conversations that fuel our spirits. Today's episode is like an extra shot of espresso for your soul, because I've got the incredible Cat Coley, and she's here today as a seasoned business storyteller coach with a caffeinated passion for helping women entrepreneurs integrate their unique stories into their business. Kat's journey from adversity to empowerment is a story worth savoring, and she's here to spill the beans on how storytelling can be the secret sauce to your business and personal success. So grab your favorite cup of coffee and let's dive into the transformative world of business storytelling with the amazing Cat Coley. Welcome back, friends. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I met Kat when I had actually posted in regards to friendship breakups. But what truly led me into Kat's story was the story itself past the breakups, right? Like, it wasn't about your friendship breakups. For me, your story lied in how you told your story. But before we dive too deep into your story right now, can we just talk about what's happening over the last 2 months with you? Can you tell us a little bit what's going on in your life in 2024?
Yes, we talked a tiny bit, a little offline, but so one of the things that, since we've last spoken, and it seems like years ago, but it's not, it's just online, but so much has happened. So
Yeah.
I have really stepped into this other persona of mine, which is something I've always wanted to do. And I have been doing, just not in this capacity, but I've been speaking a lot. So I've been speaking on stages, storytelling, basically, obviously, is what I do. And so I've been sharing my story and how to own our stories and how to own our power, our superpower. And so that speaking engagement, so I did a couple of networking, and then what that led to a speaking engagement, which then led to me being invited back to do a workshop, a private workshop for the high-end mastermind retreat. And in that retreat, I was asked to come back. So all this is happening in Las Vegas, which is, once you all figure out that I have close ties with Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And so now in just tomorrow, actually, this time tomorrow, I'll be in Vegas again, speaking at another engagement there on stage. And then I'll be speaking at another keynote from that kind of networking at another event towards the end of the year. And then again in March in New Orleans. So it's just been a whirlwind. And now to go back a little bit, the person that is putting this particular event together is also an editor, a publisher of a book that I'm going to be writing, part of, co-authoring with 6 other amazing ladies. That's going to be coming out in September, which is going to segue into the launch of my book for 2025.
Oh my God. I'm so excited. One, because I want to see so many women win. I think this is part of the platform that I'm building. And 2, Kat, you came into this year and you were like, I'm not holding any punches back. 2024 is like the year that I'm taking the bull by the horns. What did you decide that this was the year that you were going to, quote unquote, live your dream? I don't like using those words because I feel like
the
so
cliche thing, right?
Yeah.
But I think it has a lot to do. So again, offline, we just chatted a couple of seconds about it, but I'm not into human design. I'm into human design for me, not into human design for anybody else or for my business. But it's fascinating to me. And I would, if I had the time in the world, I would dive in. So I only dive in for me. But I do like what if people do know what they are in the human design world, I see that. And we chatted and you mentioned who you are and I see that. And I mentioned what I am and you're like, oh, I totally see that.
Yeah, I
so
totally
I'm a
see
projector.
that.
And
yeah.
so
And for the audience, I'm a generator.
Yes. And so if you know anything about human design as a projector, and I don't know much about anyone else again, but mine, is that I don't hold my own energy. So I get my energy from other people. So I'm not a go-go. And I used to be very much a go-go. And then I would just burn out. That was the theme of my life. Go and then launch, and then burn out before I could even deliver. That it was like, it's that seesaw thing. And the other thing is that as a projector, one of the things that's innate in us is that we wait for the invitation. I'm always like waiting for people. And it almost feels like when I pitch or when I push or when I do too many things, like it's pushed back. And so there's like this resistance. And whether it's them, it's my energy, or it's me and my energy. And the thing about projectors is that I have to think of ourselves as a lighthouse, as the beacon. And so I just need to shine. And I need to remember that. I just need to do my thing. I just need to shine. And then the people will come. And the right people will come. And that's really what I've been focusing on in the last year, but really in the last 6 months and now going into 2024 and beyond, is that I just need to do me and less of trying to attract things, whatever that may be, manifesting things, but just do me. And then that in itself will attract a book deal, a mastermind, a speaking engagement, a keynote. So I'll be a keynote at the particular event that I was at last year, where I was just speaking. And then I was asked to come back as the keynote speaker for their next year's event. And then on top of that also event led to me doing a workshop for the retreat. And now I'm working alongside them as we bring this book together. It's all these ladies that are putting this book out. I'm doing what I love to do, which is how to get our stories out there, how to unpack all of our stories, get it out to the masses so that they listen and you could, leave your legacy and change the world, change your community, change your audience. That's in a nutshell what's been happening. And I've focused more on storytelling, just all the aspects of storytelling. And then now, as we talked about just a couple minutes ago, about the delivery of it. So I'm doing more so of the ladies that are really wanting to step up and start to not just, once they have their story, is how do you share it? How do you make it compelling? How do you make it relevant? How do you make it resonate? And so that's the next evolution to what I'm doing. And those are the women that I'm attracting in by doing the things that I'm doing, which is speaking on stages. So
I don't know about my audience, but I know that, and I hope that my audience has some aspiration of the same. It doesn't necessarily mean speaking on stages, right? But what got you in? You've just become a master storyteller now. So what got you into the storytelling? What was it that triggered this love?
So the love of storytelling, it's funny that one of the things that I'm really good at is telling stories. And prior to me jumping into this venture of storytelling, when I started my business and not really trying to figure out, kind of what niche I was going into, what industry I was going into, I sent out a survey to family and friends. And this has nothing to do with what I do now. It's a light that comes on. And I asked them, what do you think are my 5 best qualities? What are my worst qualities that you could think of? An open game here. And out of the people that I shared my survey with, one of them was actually, funny enough, my ex-husband, because we're still friends and he knows me. And so I sent it to him and a couple of other close friends and family. And I would say 80% of them came back was that I was a really good storyteller. And that's before I even started down this road and I could tell a really good story. But storytelling for me is personal. So the reason why I started storytelling or sharing actually just my story, that's basically where this started. So I had a moment in my life where I had fell from grace and I had hit rock bottom several times. I often say that it's like my rock bottom has a basement. That was me. And
I love
I
this.
didn't know it at the time. And that's where I found myself. And part of the therapy that I was going through therapy, of course, because there was a lot going on in my life, but I also just wanted to share what I was going through without kind of in that one-on-one therapist patient realm. And I started to share my story in small circles and not knowing that in that small circle that it's women entrepreneurs basically. And I didn't know that at the time. When I was sharing my story, she was a book editor, and I didn't realize that she and I worked at this facility when I had a 9 to 5, and she was book editing on the side. So she had a side gig and she was connected to all these brilliant women entrepreneurs, which is not even an area I've been a corporate girl all my life, not even an area that I was even looking at. And so I was asked to come back. When I shared with her, she was like, do you mind sharing this over dinner? I've got some girlfriends that are yours and it doesn't really matter what they are, but can you share it, with them? It's amazing. And I was like, oh, I don't know. And of course, reluctant because I was still in the midst of everything that was happening in my life. And I started to share that story. And of course, that network then asked me to share here and there and here. And then as I met all these amazing, wonderful people, and then I was asked to share it on stage, which for the first time, I was asked to do a panel interview, then a podcast, and then my story was published in a book. And then that's how it snowballed from there. But really, it was me stepping out and owning my story. And I realized that when I actually did that, when I stepped out and actually owned the story, all of it, the good, the bad, the very, very bad, I didn't necessarily take control of the story. I just took control of the narrative from me. And it almost became my superpower. And there's a lot of shame and a lot of guilt and a lot of embarrassment and a lot of regret with my story and the things that I did. Because as I often say, a lot of the women that I work with, a lot of the things that they've gone through, a lot of the events that they've been through were inflicted onto them.
Yeah.
For me, for the purpose of my storytelling, it's all self-inflicted. Everything that decisions I made on my own and got me to the positions and the situations and circumstances that I found myself in. It's almost sometimes it's easier when it's self-inflicted, right? Because there's a way that you can own up to that, be accountable. But when it's not, it's not, and it's coming from somebody else. The harm, the trauma, and all of those things, the events is from somebody else. You're grappling with how do you handle the guilt, the shame, and all of those things that we still all feel, despite it coming from another person or another situation that you had no control over. But in the ways that we can own our part in that story, that is for me and for my clients, that's the transformation. That is what gets them from feeling less of a victim and feeling more empowered. And it's not forgiving or forgetting all of those things in the events that have happened. It's just owning your part in it and then trying to move on from it. And if there is no forgiveness, there is no forgiveness. I'm not
right.
And so in all the things that I've done, that has been like the biggest catalyst for me, for my own story, is really just showing up and owning the decisions that I made and the repercussions, because there were so many. It's a domino effect. Absolutely. What happened. Yeah. And so when I start to then help other women share and unpack their stories, we figure out the ones that works within the narrative that they want to work with. And we don't talk about things that they don't feel comfortable talking about. And usually once we're done working together or through our process, they do. They find the power, they find the strength, they find the bravery, they find the courage to really step out and start to share the stories that they hide most. So that to me is like the most empowering part. That to me is why I do what I do. And again, for me, it's personal. So for me, I've seen the transformation that happened in my life where I was hiding, where I was lying still, where I not necessarily didn't own up to the things that I was doing, but I certainly wasn't forthcoming with any of the information. And so it felt like I was lying all over again. So this is like just unearthing, opening the closet doors and letting people come on in. And my whole thing with me is that whatever you have said about me and my situation, and maybe we'll get to that part, doesn't really matter. Whatever you've said about me and my situation, I've said, I'm sure, about myself as well. So I'm not, again, I just open the closet door and invite you in. I'll even show you the dusty corners. I'm good with that. And that's the owning my story. That is the stepping into it, knowing the power of the things that have happened and letting go of the disempowerment that I felt going through this journey.
How difficult was it to open that door?
So,
and who was the hardest person that you had to open that door with?
My partner now, but probably the hardest. Strangers are like, I could tell a stranger.
It's so much easier telling a stranger.
Anything, yes.
There's a reason that there's videos of people pulling out a secret and reading the secret on a video, because writing your secret down and dropping a jar is not a problem. But you vocalizing your secret, that's the scary part, right?
Family and friends were the difficult ones because they're the ones who know all sides of you, right? And so they're the ones who know which masks you put on to face the world when you're not feeling it. So that was probably the most difficult, was because, again, my partner now and probably my ex as well, although we never sat down and did the full read on all the things that have happened, but because a lot of the things that happened while I was with him. And so I only scratched the surface because I didn't want to dive into my effed up world, right? And we're just trying to move on and get through everything. And so diving into the difficulties of that. But I think friends and family are usually the ones that are hardest to open up to. But the hardest of all, my daughter.
Yeah.
So she's now 12. She's 12 in a month or so, but she's now 12, and telling her gave me anxiety for years. And I put it off until it finally, I couldn't do it anymore. I wasn't showing up. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that now she's at an age where she can look things up. And I remember one day when she was 10 or something, and I didn't tell her until just this past year. I told her when she was 11. And she came in the room and she's like, she calls me Nanay, which is in Tagalog, mom. And she's, Nanay, I looked you up. I Googled you, and my heart dropped.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, she's, my friends. And I was like, oh my God. And so I'm like, what did you find? And of course, she found the things that I've been on, podcasts, my own podcast, other people's podcasts, all these things. And I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, what if she found something? And she knows what I do. She knows I have a podcast. She doesn't know the intricacies of the things that really the reason. And then I was like, it's time. She deserves to hear it from me. The worst thing would be if she heard it from somebody else, or two, she saw it on a video, or read it online. Oh my God, this is my mom. And so she was the hardest person to open up to. And I didn't give her any of the gory details of all the things, but I told her I had to own up to the things that I had done because the repercussions were huge, and she was part of that. Yeah, for sure. Her.
So when you're inviting women in to tell their own stories and the ugliness, because there isn't a single person that doesn't have an ugly part to their story. And I always equate it a little bit to in Japan, when they put together a pot or something that's broken, they line it with gold to make it look beautiful again. And I think those imperfections in our stories are what make us beautiful. How much resistance are you getting from women who are, because I couldn't imagine, I'm thinking of my own story. This is so funny. In a couple of weeks, April 8th, I'm on this podcast. I will be sharing my own personal story. And my story isn't by any means perfect, nor is it the worst that I've even heard of. But we're going through the process right now of laying out that episode. And in my head, my girlfriend who's interviewing me, I was honestly like, I don't want to talk about that part. I don't want to share that. I don't want to,
Right.
I don't want my audience to know how broken I was when I was, to give you guys a small glimpse, sitting on top of the GO train tracks thinking I'm going to end it now. Just end it. I don't want to talk about those things. I don't want to talk about how I was trapped or I felt trapped in a basement for years of my life. Like, how difficult is it for you to pull that out of women? Because I'm laughing about it mostly because I'm so uncomfortable talking about it myself.
It's a process.
Yeah.
And it's the reason why I work with women who really are really wanting to share those parts of them, but just don't know how. But the process in which to do that, it's careful because it's triggering. And so there's ways in which I have learned that works best. And that's allowing my clients and the women that I work with to tell me when they're ready. But there's also a process in which I help them get ready for that. Mm-hmm. So the first couple of times, I'll tell you that when I meet with somebody, unless they have heard my story fully, then they'll give me the superficial story. They'll give me the story that's probably on their website. And which full well, when I started to share my story, I think it took me a full 2 weeks to tell the person I was telling. I couldn't even say big words like, and again, if we get to the part, I couldn't say words like prison or jail or incarcerated, or I couldn't say those words. I would be like, I was like trying to find other things, or theft or stealing, like all of those. I could not say those words. I found other words to describe it, and they're like, so you mean you stole money? And I'm like, yeah, in a nutshell, they're like, why don't you just say that? And I'm like, but I couldn't say it. So
of course. So
I know that there's a process in which to do it. And I've learned through the years of working with women how to, I don't want to say coax it out of them, but how to give them a safe place to land. That there is no judgment, and that they are safe, and that there's a time and a process in which to walk through this journey. But it takes a lot of time. So the first couple of times that we're speaking to one another, it's very much a networking. And then there's a series of questions that I lay out in front of them, and that really gets to the heart of why they're here.
Right.
And it's in usually the third hour, so like the third or fourth call, where the floodgates open. The first one or two, it's just getting to know you kind of thing. And then it's
the building of trust.
Yeah. And then it's usually that. And there's a process in which to do it. I can tell you that there's such a difference. There's such a difference between the person that I meet day one to the person that walks away with their stories and feeling confident in sharing it and knowing that it can help other people. There's such a difference in that person. It's night and day usually. And even just the person that just shows up knowing that this is a safe place to land, that this is a safe place to share that story, all of it. And a lot of times there's times that we sit in silence, because sometimes silence is loud. And there's a light that comes in, and I could see it like almost immediately once they start. And then I did a workshop, like I said, last month in Vegas. And for this particular workshop, we had to shorten the time that we had together. So I did the series of questioning ahead of time. And by the time we got to the workshop, the floodgates were open. And everyone was typing in there. I got responses were just amazing. It's coming out of me. I don't even know. I can't even. And so that process for the workshop was the writing of this book. And that was focused on what they were going to write about, and how did they start to share these stories, and why is it relevant, and so on and so forth. But that process started with this workshop. And at first they had no idea what to write about, or they knew, but they didn't know. And then at the end, they're trying to find like which of these stories now that they had, they should write about, because now they had so many, and the floodgates were open, and we were sharing, and they were sharing. And it's been amazing to see it come to fruition and that's how it happens when I work with women. Is, again, you're closed off, like you say, you're laughing about it because it's uncomfortable, and that's your way of self-preserving. And when I talk about very similar instances of when I thought, okay, while I was away, when I was in prison, I thought many times of just going.
Yeah.
At this point in my life, I was like, who would miss me at this point? I'm already gone.
Yeah, exactly.
And people are used to not me being around. So what would me not being around really change at this point?
Right.
And so there's a lot to process there, because I could say it, and I could say it now, but in the moment, my God, it was everything. And so feeling comfortable sharing that, I had to create a cocoon for women to feel secure and trusting. And again, I hate to keep using the word safe, but safe. And
no, it's true. Yeah, you do really need to feel safe in those moments.
As you're about to share and I'm so excited to hear your story. It is a process. And as well, it's transformational for you, because this is the first time even for you that you're going to say the words out loud.
I know. I mean, it gets so much, it's funny because I didn't think that I would have the issue with it at this point in my life, because I feel like I've said it so many times, but I've never said it. Like, I've written it out in blog posts. I have even tweeted it out. I've said it to therapists. I've never actually said the words. If anything, I will say SA and not, I can't even say the words right now to you. And we've talked several times, and I feel very comfortable around you. I couldn't say it when I was laying that podcast episode out with my girlfriend. I couldn't say it to her. And this is why we're starting the process now, is because I know that I'm going to have to eventually maybe not say it in the podcast episode, but I'm going to have to say it. It's going to have to be vocalized. I can't just jump around and skirt through the issue.
Like I did. Like I found very, it's so funny. I was like, what's another word for theft? Huh. Okay. What's another word?
It was there, then it wasn't.
Prison. And again, because it's still triggering. It's in that it indicates for you. It's been some time now since it's happened, but it's still, regardless, it could be 50 years from now, it's still very triggering. It's something that is a part of you, and not a part of your identity, but it's a part of you, and you just can't ignore it. And I'm sure it's triggering when you hear that word from somebody else, when somebody else says it. It's still, for me, it's still triggering.
TikTok, sometimes what I'll do is if I see it on the screen and it's written triggering SA, I will swipe right away, because I physically sometimes can't handle it. Yeah.
And it's going to take some time, especially when you are sharing it in this. So a lot of the women that I work with, I have to say, a lot of them, and I would say, I would go even as far as to say, it's devastating, because like 70 to 80% have come through. It's a lot. It's a lot. And it's such, and those are the kind of things that we keep hidden. Again, and that's why I said in the very beginning, when it's self-inflicted, for me at least, it's easier to accept. It's easier to be accountable for it. It's easier to own. It's difficult. And I know, having worked with women who have had to cross that bridge, to own up to what part of that is yours. None of that is yours. but to own up to what has happened thus far, or what's happened up until this moment. And how do you move forward from that? And I would tell you that, again, it doesn't usually happen until a few times that I meet with women, but that it comes out. And I can pretty much at this stage know that it's coming out.
That's truly amazing. You can piece together by previous conversations as to what their story kind of looks like.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I could tell just by having worked with so many women, who have this story to tell and to share. And I could tell just in the way that we interact, and I could also tell in the way that they lay out their story for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then not that I go pushing for any of those things, and it's only if they're comfortable. And I think it's once they feel, again, they trust and they feel comfortable and they feel safe, do they tell me this is, and some will say, I'm over it and I'm through it. It's what happened. And they are, for the most part. There's a few that have gone past it and have moved on from it. That there's some where this is really is the catalyst to everything that has happened in their life. And they don't want to connect that dot. Like that dot is when I say, let's go back, let's unpack, and let's connect the dots, because that's where you see that's a dot that they want no part of. That they don't want to connect to. But it does become an important dot to connect to understand, and then to leave behind. And then, so it's going to take you some time to really get used to finding creative words to say what you need to say. And then I think there's going to be a time where you just say it.
Yeah.
Where you just say it, and it becomes not just a word to you, but it becomes a mission.
Mm-hmm.
Like that in itself, it's no longer that triggering for you, but it triggers what you're doing after, as opposed to triggering what happened in the past. So for me, in the same way, when I talk about the things I have done, and I talk about the things that has happened, those words, incarceration, jail, prison time, all of those things used to be a triggering where my heart would start to pout. And I would be like, okay, it's hot in here, and I'd try to hide. Now it becomes a trigger point of, oh, that's fascinating. Like, let's talk about that. Let's walk through that process. I've been there. I don't certainly invite the conversation in, but it's something that I don't shy away from. And I think that's going to be the similar situation for you, like in these beginning stages as you're first sharing it, because obviously you're going to share it in your episode, and then you're going to go on future episodes, hopefully like my podcast, and share it there. And then you'll just get so used to sharing it that you'll feel more and more comfortable, and it becomes, you'll come at it from a position of power, as opposed to, and I think that's what's happening now. I think that's why you're wanting to share your story, right? You're coming from a position of power. It's like, enough is enough.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not going to hold me back anymore.
No, exactly. When you're discovering and capturing these stories from women and empowering them to share those stories, at what point do these women come to you and they're like, okay, I'm ready to make it a mission? Because I feel like my story specifically, I feel like this has always been a mission. I'm now prepared to have it come to the surface.
It's usually towards once they actually feel comfortable sharing it, and then they realize how many other people their story could help.
Right.
Because to them at the moment, it happens so often, and you hear it and it goes away, and then it's like, why does it matter? And then working through the story and working through the relevance of it, and how important it is to share, not the gory details, and if that's necessary for you to work through the process, yes, but just the overall story in itself, in the sharing of it, and how it allows people and gives other people permission to start to share theirs. It usually happens as they're sharing their story. They realize how absolutely important it is, Because when they start to share their story, they start to share it in their inner circle first. And then they realize there's a lot of commonality in their story, and that there's power in numbers. And so whatever that change in that change of that transformation or that transition is that they're really wanting to help their community, their audience, their clients with, really starts in that vessel of just starting to share that story. So for a lot of the women that I work with, they've come to me because they do have a lot of stories and they want to figure out which ones to share and which ones will be a compelling story to their audience. But once we start to dig, they realize, wow, I really do want to talk about that. I really do want to specifically talk about this situation that I know happens to, unfortunately, a large percentage of women out there, and how common it is. But nobody wants to talk about how common it actually is and how devastating that it's so common. That for me, it's amazing when I do walk away from conversations and I'm like, again, and I'm just like, how again and again. And it's a lot of weight to carry, because when you hold space, as you do this as well, when you hold space for people and their stories and the events that have happened in their life, it's a lot to take in. So for me, I need some downtime because it's heavy, and it's heavy for them. It's heavy for me. But my mission is, okay, we'll carry that together. And now we go out and we share it. Now we go out and make it a mission. And now we go out and shed some light on it. Now we go out and start to share it so that other people will feel comfortable and safe sharing their stories. And again, together we can change policies, movement, whatever it may be, leave a legacy, not just leaving a legacy, but changing things for the future, the better, all of those things. And it starts really with owning our stories and owning who we are and all the intricacies, all the things that got us to where we are today. But it becomes, they don't realize it because it's not a story they share often.
No.
Once they realize that it is a story that they can share often because it happens often, it becomes part of their mission.
Yeah, absolutely. How much of your story do you use to connect with other women? And then, like, how are you getting them to amplify their stories to connect with their audience?
So I use my story often. It usually gets me in the door. Usually my story allows people to feel a level of comfort almost instantly. And because
I'll agree to that. I totally agree to that.
Because I don't shy away from it. It's not my calling card, but I also want you to know I'm for real. I'm for real.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, I'm going to open the doors. I'm going to let you in. I'm going to sit down. We're going to have a cup of coffee and we're going to walk away as friends out of this. And if nothing else is, again, I share my story, you share your story, and it gets you at a more comfortable spot in wanting to share. But I share my story often because of that. I have seen the transformation that happens when I don't, or the transformation that doesn't happen when I don't, and the transformation that happens when I do. So I always open with my story. As a storyteller, that's what I do.
Natural.
And it shows you. One of the things that I talk about when I do speak, a couple of the topics I talk about is selling without selling.
Yeah.
And selling with your story. And I did this in Las Vegas back in September of last year. And I was one of maybe 15 speakers. And I was the only one that did not have a presentation. Everyone else had a PowerPoint presentation, and we spoke for 30 plus minutes. So I was the only one that all I had was my photo up there, and then I don't even think it stayed up there. And I spoke. I led a couple of activities about storytelling, gave some points, and then I told my story. And in the end, when I got off the stage, I was brought back for Q&A. I was the only speaker that was brought back for Q&A. And then there was a line of people that were asking about my story and how do I deliver it and all these other things. And then when I was brought back on stage, and I wasn't expecting to be brought back on stage, I was expecting to speak off to the side. One of the things I said was, I just gave you an example of how to sell with your story and how to sell with selling. That was There was no presentation. I had no call to action in the end. And I made that very purposeful. And for the fact that when I walked away from that, I did actually, I got 5-6 clients out of that talk.
Wow.
Just because there's a way in which you can deliver your story to get people to automatically resonate with you. And I'm the person that I know that my story, it could easily turn you off.
Yeah.
Or it could easily turn you on. Mm-hmm. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay to be polarizing in that way. You can hear my story and be like, no, thank you. Or you can hear my story and be like, wow, I'm really interested. And obviously I'm going to go with the people that are interested, and I'm okay with the people that aren't, because I'm not going to fight for that. And I'm not there to convince them. I'm here to be transformational and transparent in what I do and how I can do it. And I show that in the way that I share my story. So I always lead with my story. When I do my talk tomorrow, I have a very short amount of time, and I will always lead with my story. Right. And what it does, and again, when we're talking, when you're delivering, what you always want is for somebody to ask for more. And so when I start to get my clients from being comfortable enough to start to share their story, and then wanting to actually share their story, so putting their signature stories together, whether that's they're applying to speak on stage, a TED Talk, a podcast, or any of those things, what we want is always somebody to say, okay, I want to hear more. Like, I don't divulge. I can't. It would take weeks to divulge my entire story. And I don't think I've ever divulged my entire story in its entirety. It's bits and pieces. That's from my book. Yeah. But I know how to deliver it in a way where someone says, I either want to hear more about you, or I want to work with you. Like, those are the two things. And so when I work with women, I always lead, always. And I tell them as well, like, the facts is tell and stories sell. And that has always been the case, always. And so we just have to understand how to tell that story, how to share it in a way that's compelling.
So obviously, we're going to get you to give us tips as to how to do this. You don't need to give us your secret recipe, but you need to give us something.
Yes. So the first thing is, obviously, is one, you have to know your audience. So you have to understand who you're speaking to. The second thing is, I know people always talk about understanding people's pain points, but pain points aren't really that universal. So speaking to a group of 150 women or 100 women, everyone has a different pain point. But I picked the one that I feel is universal to all of them. So those are typically relationships, money, sex, success. Mm-hmm. Those are the three, depending on health. And so I pick one of those, and I choose one that I will speak about in relation to my story. If I'm just going to use my story of resilience. So my story is I stole money. I went to prison for it, came home with absolutely nothing, and was told that I should probably just crawl under a rock, because no one would ever want to hire me, want to do anything with me. Right. And I should never speak about my situation ever again. Obviously, there's a whole story behind how it all happened and what transpired. And I chose the latter. I chose the one that no one actually gave me, which was, I started to share the story, all of it, like all the stuff, and owning my story. So I'll use my story of resilience and owning my story. So I will talk about my failures first and foremost, because that resonates with an entire audience, because we have all.
You can go on all day, right? But just about failures.
Yeah, exactly. So failures and the bounce back. So those are the two things that I will talk about constantly. So know your audience, pick a pain point that's universal. And then when you're delivering your talk or your sharing, make it so there is an invite to ask for them to ask for more. So when you're sharing your story, almost have it read like a book, basically. So where the book ends, but it's to be continued. So because nothing is ever wrapped up in a pretty bow. Nothing ever is. And so my life still isn't. And I will talk about on stage just because I came, I did this, I'm now speaking on stages, my life isn't perfect. My life isn't tied up in a bow. I still wake up not wanting to share some of my story. I still wake up in anxiety sometimes. There was a TV show the other night I was watching with my daughter, and it was some silly show, and it was like a kid show, but it was like a comedy show, and it said, my mom was stealing money from her work, and as part of and I was like, I didn't realize it, but my heart like skipped a beat, and I looked over at my daughter who like kept on watching whatever, and I'm like, so there's still, my life isn't, again, there's relationships and all kinds of things that still happen. So I never want to wrap my presentation up with saying everything is perfect. I'm now like, 7-figure business owner and I'm doing all of these things. No, it's not. There's still struggles every day. So make it universal, know your audience, make it universal, find a pain point that's universal. Never wrap your talk or your segment up with a pretty bow. Always invite them to come back and ask for more. There's the intricacies of sharing your story, which unfortunately, goes a lot deeper, by understanding how to then share a compelling story. There's a story arc and all of those things, but that's a total deep dive into storytelling. But those are the three basic things that you should know. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a talk. It just could be when you're sharing your story. It could be when you're writing about it, or it could be on social media. Know the audience. Understand what is it that's going to resonate with them, and then show up as the real you. As the real you. As much of the real you as you possibly can. Take off all the masks. That's why behind the scenes stuff does so well. Although sometimes the behind the scenes stuff is also staged, so you can't really tell.
I know. I get it sometimes from my social media team being like, can you show us the behind the scenes of what the editing process looks like? And I was like, you guys, do you have any idea how hard that is to set up? First of all, and then second of all, I could do it, but one, it's not pretty. It's not aesthetically pleasing. My desk is a mess. I have to think about all these things first before I even start filming the behind the scenes process. If you saw what the desk looked like before I did the behind the scenes process, you wouldn't be looking at the behind the scenes.
Exactly. You'd be like, okay, is it hoarder or what's happening? Or whatever you want.
Yeah. There's 5 cups of coffee plus wine glasses and then my 60 notebooks and then Post-its. It's not pretty.
I love the behind the scenes where it is really pretty, and I'm just like, what desk is that?
Yeah, I've seen those. Like, no,
that's just, again, the stage behind the scene. Like,
girlfriend took 10 minutes to clean up first.
It would take me an hour. I'm exhausted from the cleaning just to show the behind the scene.
For 2 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah. No. A 30-second. Yeah. No. But so
how do you leave them coming back for more? I guess is my question. Like, how do you invite the people to open the door for a conversation, I guess is the best way to put it.
For that to happen, obviously you have to be able to build the trust and the interest in the stories. For people to be invited more when you are sharing all of your stories, is that I wouldn't lay out your story in chronological order. There's a way in which you could start your story from the time the day it happened, the time it happened, if that's or the moment or the time frame it happened, as opposed to sharing the time order or the origin story of your life per se. Mm-hmm. Because then that leads people to say, okay, I want to know more about what transpired from this segment in her life to where she is now. So whenever I share like my particular story, I share from the time that I made the choice, which was well into my adulthood. But there were so many other things that happened prior to. And then I skip like decades to where I'm at now. And because that journey from what happened to where I'm at now, that's where the transformation happened. That's where the change happened. That's when I learned about storytelling. That's when I learned, how to cultivate it and create it as a business now. And that's how I learned how to work with hundreds of women and how to master storytelling. So I start from what happened to where I'm at now. And then I invite people to learn what that process was like. And how do you go from inmate Cat Coley
Yeah.
to author and keynote speaker? How does that happen?
Yeah.
And so I don't lay all that out in that time frame. I invite people to come back and say, this is your calling. If this is something that you want to do, and turn these events, these circumstances, all of these things into something that you could be, that could be a mission, that could be a part of the foundation of your business, and that you want to share, then I'm your person. I'll help you do that. We'll work through that process. So I leave crumbs along the way, and I leave them wanting to, one, know more about what happened, because prison life is intriguing.
Sorry. I love that you were nonchalant about it. It's intriguing.
People are like, oh my God. And again, the times I do get pulled off stage is when someone wants to share something with me that's happened, or they actually want to share that they have family members that have that are currently in the system, or was in the system, or they were in the system. And it humanizes humans. It humanizes us. It really does.
I know, and that's how we
still
feel
regretful. I'm
connected
still
to other
ashamed.
people. Of
Right,
course,
yeah.
but
And,
that's how we really feel connectable, right? Like,
right.
I remember when, and I don't think a single woman didn't feel some form of heartbreak when they heard this, but I remember the day that I had heard when Beyonce released her Lemonade album, and it was basically like a tribute to her miscarriage. And I think women all over the world understood her struggle in that moment, whether they didn't want a baby or didn't want children or had never experienced a miscarriage. I think there was a heartbreak that happened because there was a unified connection to her being human. And that was the first time, I think, especially for me, I will say, because the Beyonce like literally felt human to me. Because sometimes I wonder if she's Superwoman.
Right. Like she's an enigma, right?
Right. Yeah. But in that moment, I was like, oh my God, she's still just a woman. Like she's just a person.
And when you lead with that, it takes off the facade quickly, right? Because one, that what you want to do is attainable. And if speaking on stages and sharing your story and all of those things is a path that you want to go on, when somebody like Beyonce, who's looked at and put on a pedestal, can humanize her experiences, and as a universal experience that, again, happens to so many millions and millions of women, and she speaks about it openly and creates an album about it and sings songs about it, it starts to really, all the walls that we put up and all the pedestals, it knocks people down. And I want to be at that level. I'm on stage speaking or writing a book because I shared my story, and there is no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
Yeah.
I would not be where I'm at today if I didn't, if I shied away, if I didn't own up to it, if I was scared of it, and all of those things, I would not be doing what I'm doing. I would not be asked to share my story in on stages, on podcasts, on interviews, or writing a book if I didn't have the courage to share. And the courage to share for me was, I'm not going to let this circumstance, the events that led up to this, the choices that I made, determine the rest of my life. I'm just not. And people have cast me as I was done. And I was it. That was it. Like in a way, like I might as well have gone away for forever in my life, because there was nothing that ever good was going to happen once I left. And it was not necessarily to prove them wrong, although there's a part that still resonates with me, but it was to prove me wrong too, that I could do something else. And so that, for me, that is the catalyst, and that is the drive that pushes me. But also that was like the initial drive. But then as I started to share and people started to share with me, I was like, wow, there's just some amazing stories. People have gone through such amazing situations and experiences and circumstances, and they've bounced back, or they found a way, or they've learned, or they've created a mission, or whatever it may be. It's become their foundation. People need to know about it. And that's when I was like, okay, me showing up as me, all the faults, all the crap, allows people to show up as themselves as well. And how amazing is that? And how cathartic is that for everyone involved? And so that becomes my mission. Like, I really want to unpack your story so that the world listens and you create the impact that you want to create, because that's where it starts. That is where it starts. I would not be here if I didn't share that first time I shared it, and then the second, and then the third, and now the 1000th time I've shared it.
Is it easier the more times that you share it?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's good to know. That's really good.
I couldn't imagine now that what I'm doing now, speaking about it on stages in front of hundreds of people, on podcasts being downloaded, so on and so forth. Back then, I could barely tell the one person I was telling, and it took me like, I don't know, hours. And there was the person I once was working through the process, weeks to tell my story. So it gets absolutely easier. I would tell you in probably a few months, it's going to get much better. In 6 months, you're going to get really good at it. In a couple of years, you won't even think about it. It won't be what it is right now. I'm telling you, it's way, way easier. Repetition, consistency.
I often wonder if you started sharing it obviously in small groups, and then first it was close family members. When you started sharing your story, was it like just always like small groups, and then all of a sudden you were pushed into talking about it on stage? Was there a progression that happened, or was it?
Yes. And so it was in small one. It was one person, the first person I shared it with, a colleague who was in a networking, a weekly networking with several other women. And then, so with her and in like a small group of 6 to 10 ladies, and then their small group. And again, what I didn't know or realize then was one of them was putting an event together and needed speakers. And so she was looking for a panel interview. And that's the first time I actually spoke on stage about my story, was through a panel. And I think that was probably a good way, because I shared that pressure with 3 other ladies, which was fantastic. But that was my foot in the door in a way of speaking on stages. But what really propelled my speaking was doing podcasts. Podcast is the most amazing tool that you could possibly use when you're speaking, get you prepared for the stages and so on and so forth. So for me, that pathway was in person, because that's how I was sharing it with just an intimate number of women. Not expecting that this was going to be a thing. I just was friendly, networking, girls' night out almost kind of thing. And then, which led into that. But really what really pushed it to the stratosphere was podcasting and online summits. So online summits and podcasting were the kind of the 2 things that really got me used to speaking about my story and the process in which I tell the story and how it lands. It's the in-person where you get the automatic feedback, right? That's the great thing about an in-person type of event. You can read the room. Podcasting is a little bit different, but it really gets you to hone in on parts of the stories that you want to share and how to share it. Because in podcasting, we've been podcasting here for an hour now, but there's podcasts that are 15 minutes. So you know when to scale up or down. And that's a muscle that you have to learn when you're sharing your story. Which part of your story is to share? How long do you have to share it? How do you make it compelling? podcasting for absolute sure was probably, for me, one of the best ways to get me used to sharing my story over and over and over and over again. And then the stage became a natural progression from there.
Oh.
So,
is it harder the bigger the audience gets for you?
No, as a projector, I feed off the audience energy. So for me, speaking on stages, I don't have that. Yes, of course I get, nervous, but it's an excited nervous. I love it. It's something that fuels me. I love in-person interaction, but whether it's, I almost feel like 6 people or 10 people is a little bit more nerve-wracking than 1,000 people. Like 1,000 people, it's just, it's like the numbers from that point, when it's intimate and everyone's, I feel like, all eyes on you kind of thing, like that pressure, like
right, because 1,000 people, they could be looking at their phones, looking at their person.
Yeah, exactly. And really, when you're speaking to a group of 100, whatever more, you'll know it really helps honing your speaking skills, because you do get that immediate response from your talk. And so people could be looking at your phone or their phones, or having conversations, and you have to know you can't get caught up in whatever they're doing. And so it really helps you get to the point right away, or get to the point faster when you're speaking on. But when it's intimate, it really is like all eyes on you kind of thing. And the pressure, like you feel that pressure, like they're like waiting for you to land whatever it is that you're trying to land. Where it's 100 people or more, you're like speaking to the front row. And so for me, it doesn't, the pressure is not there. But again, I am used to speaking in front of an audience. I did it for my corporate, job for many years. And again, as a projector, I feed off of the energy. Now, if the energy is bad and there's no one paying attention, then I'd be like, okay, this was not a good idea. For the most part, because I lead with my story, and because I know how to share my story in a compelling way, and I know how to hook an audience as well. There's a process in which to do that. One of the ladies at the event that I spoke at said that I had them eating out of the palm of my hand. They could not wait for the next thing. And there's a way in which to do that as well. And I've learned that, and I used to spill it all. And I'm like, okay, like there's a process. Like I gotta wait for the audience to catch up,
react,
and then before moving on to the next. So I know where to pause. I know how to help my clients know where to pause, where to take a breath, where to sip a glass of water. There's the process in which and how to speak as well, that aside from the storytelling part is delivering your compelling story. So
okay, so let's talk about your program for a second, and how you're getting more women to tell their stories, and then sharing your story, because you're trotting back and forth in Vegas.
Yes.
I feel like it's every weekend. I feel like you're just constantly telling me you're going to Vegas.
It feels like it. I've actually been to Vegas more times in the last like 4 months that I've been, like, and I used to live in Vegas. So that's kind of where my story started. So basically the ways in which I work with women, I do story sessions with them. So I invite them to unpack again all their stories, and it's a 3-month mastermind, one-on-one mastermind. And there's a group component to it as well that I'm opening up. But the most popular way to work with me is for women who want to work one-on-one, because some of them don't feel comfortable yet to explore sharing their story in a group setting. And I get that. So I have that mastermind, a group mastermind for those who are. So the group mastermind is called Story to Impact. And it's taking your stories and creating an impact-driven business with it, and a mission-driven business with it. And we do that in a group setting. But then I also do that as a one-on-one mastermind and I call it story sessions, where I dive really deep into the many variations of our stories, because there's many. And how do we connect that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stories, however many it is, to the overall goal that you have for your business? And how do you create your messaging and your mission to then mirror the progression and the transformation that you've been through? And what you want your audience to go through as well. So we have that process. And then I do a story session. So I think of story sessions, I have a VIP day. So it's like a full day that we spend together. But this is for a person that already knows what their story is, but really wants to hone in on how to deliver that story. So I did it as a VIP day because I was finding women who are ready to share that story are obviously limited on time. We all are limited on time. But for those particular women that they only really have one day to dive in, and they want to, for those that are just want to get it done and go through it and dive in. But the VIP day is broken up into 3 parts. Unless you're like physically here in Los Angeles, right. Most of my clients are not. Then we break it up into 3 sections in 3 days. And then we, at the end of that 3-day session, which equates to an 8-hour day, basically, you have your signature story, and we know how to deliver it and how to start to share it. And so that is the kind of the package in which my programs are aligned with and how I invite people in. So typically it's either a one-on-one, a group setting, or a VIP day. And then soon is what we just talked about is the delivery of that story. The feedback that I have been receiving is they want to know how I deliver my signature talk. And there's a way in which to do that. So it's so soon. That's a one-on-one session where it's the delivering of your signature story. How do you do that in 10 minutes? How do you do that in an hour? Because there's so many different ways. So when I speak in tomorrow, I have a shorter amount of time than a keynote speaker. So I have to know my story in and out and be able to share it in a very short amount of time. So that's what I teach my audience how to do, my clients how to do as well. So that is, and then the book comes out in September.
I know, and I'm so excited about the book. I'm just overall excited. But you also have a podcast.
I do have a podcast. It's called Bounce Back Like a Badass. And it's been on hiatus just because of all the things, but bringing it back. And hopefully we'll have you on there when you are sharing your story. And it's about my story. So if you want to dive deeper into my story, what happened, all of it, that is the best place to go to. And then it is a series of interviews with amazing, incredible women who have found ways to bounce back from their situations, their experiences, their circumstances, and is able, one, to share that, and to provide a pathway for others as well, and in the transformation that's happened in their lives. But again, it's also just a safe place to land when we're sharing our stories. So it is Bounce Back Like a Badass. One of the things that every time I would share my story prior to me starting this podcast, people would say, God, you're such a badass. And I didn't feel like a badass. I was just like, I just needed to survive.
That takes time to catch up. That really just takes time for us all to catch up, right?
And so those words would always be, wow, you're bounced back. You're such a badass. Wow, how to bounce back. You're a badass. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to put those two together, and that's how this is going to come together. But so that's a way as well. So if you are wanting to share your story and you're not ready for that big stage yet, this is another, I'd invite you to come in and share your story on the podcast. Because again, you will share your story on the podcast once yours is out and published.
Yes. I honestly, I say this often to not just my clients who are launching a podcast, but also just women in general. There's a lot of power in your story, and it's not just about you owning that power in your story, but also you have no idea how that story is going to change somebody else, right? Which is the beauty of my podcast, is that I'm hoping that the stories that I'm telling on it are changing women and making them look a little differently at their lives.
And just, again, and not holding so much shame and guilt and resentment and anger and judgment because of it, right? And I think that's the part that really speaks to the masses, is that when we find stories that resonate with us, whether it's our past or someone that we know, it just allows to stop looking around and thinking, I'm alone in this process, that you need not have gone through what I have gone through, but I can bet that you have felt alone and disappointed and failed and feeling like you're at the end of your rope. I'm sure that resonates with a lot of people. And that's the message, is that we can come back from that. And we have the ability to, and we need not look any further really than ourselves to get that process started. Yes, there's all kinds of assistance and help out there, but it really does start with us. It starts with us taking that first step and owning it. And so it really, when we start to embark in the process of sharing our stories, that is really the impact that I know I want to make, and I'm sure that you want to make as well, is that you're not alone in this.
No.
That these feelings are universal, and that there's a pathway to the other side, and we can do it together.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. All right, Kat, as we're wrapping up here, where can people find you and connect more with you? Other than your podcast.
You can find me on Instagram. I'm The Real Cat Coley. I'm also on Facebook, The Real Cat Coley, Coley, CatColey.com. And I'm on LinkedIn, The Real Cat Coley. I don't know, is there a fake Cat Coley? There actually are several Cat Coleys out there. So they're not fake. They're just, so that's where you can find me, DM me. But I would love to invite you, anyone that's listening who is wanting to share their story or ready to walk that pathway and sharing their story, to one of the sessions that I have, whether that's the VIP day, if you already have a story that you just want to learn how to share, or you want to dive into your stories and do the mastermind, or if you feel comfortable sharing your story and feel better in numbers in a group setting, we have Story to Impact as well. So hopefully you'll find yourself in one of those variations, or if it's delivering your story that is in the works right now, and then get DM me. And
love that.
Thank you so much for having me.
We loved having you. Thank you so much for sharing, Kat.
Yay!
We'll probably have to do a small update later when you're like launching your book and stuff. So Kat will be back, I'm sure.
I will be. Yes, I will be back.
Yes.
I will be back. It's launching in September. I think the book launches on Amazon in August. And then the actual physical release of the book is going to happen in Las Vegas. I swear I'm tired.
That's where Kat lives.
Exactly.
Might as well just come back.
That's where I reside in September. So super excited. But yes, I will definitely come back on and talk a bit about the book and also the women that are part of the anthology. So super excited.
Amazing.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, there you have it, latte lovers. What a delightful blend of inspiration and storytelling magic with Kat. I hope that you've brewed up some fantastic ideas on your own narrative and are willing to share just a little bit more of your story to help somebody else out. Remember, your story is a secret ingredient that can elevate your brand to new heights and help you unchain from those shackles of shame and call back your power. A big shout out goes to Kat for gracing me today with her experience, expertise, and sharing the power of storytelling. Don't forget to connect with her, guys, and let's remember that our coffee cups are often filled with inspiring stories to remind us that our journeys are similar to someone else's and we are not in this world alone. Until next time, keep brewing success, my fellow latte lovers. I hope that this episode inspired you and you take bigger steps in creating that beautiful life that you've always wanted. If today's episode warmed your heart, please hit that subscribe button and stay with us for future journeys. If you enjoyed the chat today, your thoughts and feedback mean the world to me, and they'll help others discover the magic of Share a Latte. Each story enriches our journey. Remember, you can turn trials into triumphs and scars into stars. Keep believing and keep chasing those beautiful dreams. This is Min taking her last sip from the Share a Latte podcast, where life happens and coffee helps.